Am I good? All right. Can everybody hear me, see me? Or seeing me is a force of habit because we're all on Zoom calls these days. Of course, you can see me. I'm right in front of you. Thank you for attending to our talk. You might notice that I'm saying our talk, but it's just one of me. My dear colleague, Mac Clark, is out with COVID. These are the times that we live in. So there's two parts of this presentation, one that was meant for me and one that was not meant for me. I'll try to do my best to do justice to it. But our talk is Succeed by Failing, a game developer's journey in error and crash reporting. So thanks for attending, also for the people who are joining us online. Cool. And my remote clicker doesn't work, but that's okay. All right. I would like to start with a quote, a little corny maybe, but at the end of the day, people won't remember what you say or did, but will remember how you made them feel. So I will make you feel very confused. Now, I hope not. But there's a couple of takeaways that are there that I would like you to take away from that. Some are feelings, some are thoughts. First of all, your time is valued here. We are taking 20 years of our experience of Mac and mine in game development, as well as just the technology in general, distilling that into 20 minutes of your time, wanting to share some information on what we've learned over the time. So we want to make you feel that your time is valued. Do feel free to ask questions. We have a booth in the break room as well, so come look us up. A little bit about who we are. Like, I'll start with myself because I am actually here. My name is Vincent Lussenburg. I'm a technical product manager for Backtrace, a Sauce Labs company. Who is Sauce Labs? Some of you guys might be familiar who we are. We are a testing company. We have many different products. Some of the ones I'd like to call out is we do beta testing, guide that process so that you can manage all your beta users and things like that. The biggest product we have is our Real Device Cloud. Hundreds of devices plugged into a data center, Android and iOS devices, so you can use them to test your games. And I primarily work for the Backtrace product. Throughout this talk, this presentation, we will go more into what that product does to feed forward a little bit its error and crash monitoring, which is sort of what this talk is really about. The person who couldn't join us today is Mac Clark. He is really the game developer of us too. I have a background as a gamer, not a game developer as much. Mac is separate from being a talented musician and singer, game developer as well. He's a sales engineer for Sauce Labs. So that's the two of us. Another thing that I hope you take away from this is lessons on how to fail. And the irony does not escape me that I'm originally from the Netherlands. My accent doesn't allow me to pronounce fail exactly right, so I'm even failing at pronouncing fail. So the irony does not escape me. But to fail often, and as well in the right way. There's right ways of failing and wrong ways. So first of all, Mac made a video game. This obviously is his part of the presentation, so I'm going to try to do justice to it. But he can tell you with a lot more enthusiasm the labor that went into that. It's a fly fishing game. It's on Unreal 3. And every tree, every rock, every detail in the Hive map has been crafted with love by him in the many levels that he made. And these are based on actual locations that he has fly fished. I am not a fly fisher, so some of this will be lost in translation. He went into like many different aspects and iterations of making a video game, to doing a lot of the art. So he's an indie dev, did all of this himself, to like modeling the science of like the National Forest Service, to creating on the top right a trophy room where you have all your different trophies, to doing like the actual gameplay feel on the bottom left and bottom right. So he did a number of things right and created a game that people like. It's engaging. It communicates. You learn real-life skills. You learn about places in nature that you can actually go and fish. So there's a lot of things he did right. He used specific aspects of the engine to the best of his abilities iteratively as well. Initially doing things right, but some things go wrong as well. As you try to use, in this case, blueprints for UE3, you can scale them in the wrong way, where it turns into something like this. So this is an example where you've learned something, and when you see, this is actually the decision matrix on whether or not a fish is caught. So this looks like something that is going to be a complete maintenance nightmare. So that's an example of something that went wrong. So the core tenet of this talk is it's about failing often and doing it in the right way. So let's dive in a little bit on why failing is good in the first place. So and these points build on each other. So first of all, like failing and feedback kind of go hand in hand because you don't really know that you failed until you've received the feedback that something is broken or sucks, either by a human or a build script just saying that the code that you just wrote doesn't really compile, so please try again. You need that feedback, especially for the more elaborate gameplay things of like, is this fun or not? And there's no one right way. So it's really important to use that feedback loop to get the feedback early and often. So that the second point is that you learn. So just finding out other approaches that could be better, seeing how other people play the game, how they interact with it. And learning is great, that's amassing of knowledge, but it culminates into actually doing something that matters, so really growth, because knowledge is fine, but you want to use it and turn it into growth, either personal growth for you as a person, or growth or as a game developer, or growing in the engagement that your game provides. And this is actually the process of how innovation happens. You need these intermediary steps to do things that are truly remarkable. We're not here, or I'm not here, to tell you that just go out there, run out in the world and fail immediately. There are catastrophic ways of failure that should be avoided, right? So there is a little bit of nuance to the points that I'm making here. Some of that is focused on, there's no sense in repeating mistakes over and over again. There is a slight difference between genius and stupidity. I also think of it as in terms of stubbornness. Going into like a specific direction, being really convinced that you're doing things in the right way in light of evidence to the contrary. Stubbornness is a tool that you use, and you can put it back into your tool belt at times where it doesn't serve you. So it's good to keep in the back of your head. One of them being wrong way to fail is not launching at all. So it doesn't mean that you throw the initial unfinished buggy product right over to people that will engage with your game, but it's also not focused on like perfectionism. It is fine to have a game that communicates what your game needs to do, right? Like the core concepts of your game, the minimal viable product, as you will, where maybe like not all the art is exactly in the right way how you want it. The gameplay might be unbalanced in different locations, but you need the feedback, and in order to get the feedback, you need to launch. If there's technical problems that prevent you from doing so, which was related to an anecdote that Matt could tell you, I'm not as eloquent in that, but it is really important to focus on your getting rid of your technical problems so you can at least have that launch cycle. Second is failure to capitalize if you have some momentum. So this is true not just in games. You see it in like the music industry, for example, as well. Many other industries, I imagine. You can get a little bit of traction with people. They get something of you that they like, but that does mean that they want something extra in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks, right? So that has something to do with keeping your momentum, which we will talk further along in the talk as well. Failure to engage as well, like this is just if no one knows about your game, you can't engage in that feedback loop successfully. So there's lessons, there's learnings on that as well. It's like how you should just distribute your dev budget and your marketing budget, even if you're an indie developer. Wonderful. So let's add some interaction about brand experience. So I'm going to ask the audience, what's the minimum star rating for you to download an app or replace it in your head with a game? And I know that the true answer is it depends, but just like summarize it up for me. So who would download, is that a question or? Oh, okay. So I would say, like, who of you would, out of a 5-star rating, would download an app with 2 stars? Okay, no hand. Oh, 1 hand. Okay. 3 stars. All right, that adds 3. 4. All right, like now we have most of the hands up, and 5 is everybody, I would say. Maybe nobody or someone doesn't download apps in this room. That's also possible. The 4.5. That's the sweet spot. Yeah, that's usually where I go for with restaurants, right? Like if 4.5 stars, otherwise I'm not interested. It's the way that you raise your hands is very consistent with the research that Attentive did. They've done this for the past, like I want to say 5 or 6 years or something like that. And every year, this graph chart looks very similar. If you have 1 or 2 stars, and this translates loosely to like a Steam store, for example, as well, although it is based on mobile apps, you're not going to get a lot of traction. So you don't want that. Jumping from 2 to 3 stars, that quadruples your conversion rate, and from 3 to 4 doubles your conversion rate. So there is a sweet spot there to be aware of. And also know that once you're in those realms of the 1 to 2 stars, like it's really hard to escape that field of gravity once you're there. So what you would say, why am I telling you this? There is a point to it, I promise. One of the points to it, and I know this is really small, so there's the zoomed in version of it. So part of the Attentive 2022 benchmark report, they go into and analyze trends in the market, mobile market specifically. It's really interesting to read. I would recommend you check it out. But one of the aspects there, they look at why are certain reviews given. Like if sentiment is negative, demarcated in red, what are the reasons, what's the kind of text that's associated with that? And what we see is things like, every time, please fix, doesn't work, keep crashing. So you probably see the point that I'm going to try to make. Another piece of research is slightly older from a university in Canada. Did like sort of the same thing, analyzed the frequency and impactfulness. If I zoom in on that, we see the same thing. So people tend to leave reviews if something doesn't work for them, like functional errors, apps are crashing and stuff like that. These pop up a lot. So what? Basically, you want to prevent frustrating your users so they leave bad reviews. So your score goes down, and you don't get that adoption, and people don't really engage with your game. So the important aspect of failing successfully, in a way, is making sure you address these problems quickly. Now, I will immediately admit that there's different ways to address negative reviews on an app store. There's like in-app support, for example, as well, giving your users a different location to complain instead of at the app store. But this is the reason that I'm bringing it up. To summarize, failing the wrong way is preventing poor experiences or setting expectations for the people that you're working with incorrectly. You'll lose customers or players, and they're not going to come back. That's one of the hardest things to do. 25% of customers that have a bad brand experience will not come back, and I surely have examples of that in my own personal experience. I hope you all too. How do we fail the right way? One of the things I already alluded to earlier, keeping momentum. Like software iteration is already like sort of expected right now, the whole continuous deployment thing. But the feedback that you're getting is not supposed to bog you down and slow you down. If people find something that they like, they're going to want your constant updates. That's the way that they stay engaged. So failing the right way is iterating and building that into your project plan in a way. Sometimes it's really tempting to just make a waterfall planning of I'm just going to build this game in this way. No iteration is going to be necessary. I'm going to do it the first time right. Don't fall for that. Shift left and right. In this case, it's meant like test often and not just in one place. Like do your testing on the left side of your game life cycle and on the right side as well. And do it in the right way that makes sense for where you are. So sometimes you want your feedback from automated things that run, unit tests, integration tests, and stuff like that, that verify that the stuff that you've written still work. You want to test these things in the cheapest way possible. But some things like, is my game fun? Is this level too hard? Is this level too easy? You can only find that out later, but build that into your process because you're going to need feedback from actual players to tune some of these things. Which leads into regression testing as well. The moment that you've identified mistakes, and we all make them, that talk is about making mistakes and learning from that. But put like a book stop to that and think of, okay, this is a problem that I had. How do I make sure that the next time that I do something the same or similar, that there's something that automatically flags it down? So think of where you can put in a test that actually appropriately tests that at the lowest level of feedback loop that you can. Like, even if it's like you do things that you manually check when you launch each version of the game, but of course it's ideal to do it earlier in the process in an automated way. So those are some of the examples of failing the right way. Now it's gonna have a little bit of a taste of a product pitch because I do work for a company and they do provide an error and crash management platform, but I really want to abstract this away as well because it's not just about the Backtrace product that we offer that does a thing, but about the philosophy behind it, and that's compressing the life cycle. You can think of resolving your errors quickly, errors you want to make, or you want to have errors and crashes in your game in a way because you want to move fast, you want to iterate. So it's partially about figuring out that there's a problem and figuring out what the blast radius is, who is being affected, what kind of device is being affected. So that's the left-hand side of the screen. To the bottom of the screen, you see MTTD, that stands for mean time to detection. So just knowing that there's a problem. What's really important to think about is how do you capture these problems? Because you do that different in production from testing and release, right? In production, you have to think about PII data, GDPR. Like you can't just capture anything that you want. You have to be careful with that. For your beta testers, maybe that's not really, maybe they're employees of your or contractors that you work with. That cannot be a problem. So maybe you're recording like partially videos of their gameplay experience. So the moment that they press a bug report button, that you have 30 seconds of video of what they did before. Up to you, but there's different ways of doing that. And the important thing is that you think about it early so that you don't have to do it manually, right? Organizing is also very important. So we get a little bit technical the moment that I talk about symbolication. Won't go into that too much, but basically if your game hard crashes, it can be actually pretty hard to figure out where it exactly crashed. You would have to take that crash dump, you have to load it in an editor, you have to get like debug files and stuff like that. It can be very manual and labor intensive process. And if you have 5 people that are playing your game and they send you these dumps over email, well, you can kind of do that for like up to like 10 a week or something like that. But that turns problematic very quickly the moment that you're more in the direction of production and stuff like that. Wow, time's going fast. On the right-hand side, things are focused on MTTR, actually resolving it. So it's great that you have the ability to deduplicate these problems, that you see these like 500 errors that happened are all the same underneath. That's something that can do that analysis for you automatically. But to the right-hand side, think about how do you get everything to your developers that they need to solve the problem, as well as how do you embed it into your workflow so that it doesn't really live off in an island, but it is in their Discord, Jira, Slack, etc., etc. This is an example of failing the right way, prioritizing with different metrics as well. An example of, to the top right, left, I see error-free users and error-free application launches. So Having information on your crashes and errors is very important, but having context is maybe even more important. Maybe I have 500 errors that happened just now, but I see that the vast majority of my customers is unaffected. So having that context to determine that goes into determining that blast radius, right? So that's important to consider. I don't expect anyone, especially in the back of the room, to see that. So let me just pull up the pieces of information that are particularly important. This is an example of the triage overview that basically takes these hundreds, tens of thousands, or like even millions of errors and puts them in independent buckets. We see it on the left-hand side fingerprint that identifies a group of errors that is automatically bucketed together. So I see that although it's just one line item, it's actually about 2,200 errors that happened that affected 2% of my application launches. See that a Jira ticket is created automatically as well. I can get an indication as well as how many users are affected. So again, this is, you have the ability to prioritize with deduplication, crash-free metrics, and issue tracking in that way to get a good impact of how big is the problem, what's the blast radius, who is affected. Speaking of who is affected, there's different ways that you would want to look at your set of errors as well, so that you, for example, here can compare, is a problem more prevalent, for example, on PlayStation versus Android or iOS? And slice and dice that data in many different ways so that you can like tease out the information that you want. Maybe the problem is a memory problem in a specific level. Just by looking at the data and manipulating the data, you would want to be able to tease that information out, because otherwise you just have tens of thousands of error reports. That's drinking from the fire hose. It's too much to do something with. Now we skip to the latter part of that. It's great to prioritize, know that you're a problem, but how do you actually fix it? How do you get the information in the hands of the developer without having that back and forth between maybe a beta tester and the developer, or even a customer out in the field? So I talked about call stack symbolication before. So this is an easier example because it's a managed exception, not the entire process died. So there's only one faulting thread, but sometimes you have an entire process dump. Getting that into human readable code and linking into the source code, as you see below, is not always as easy. So automating that in some way is very imperative to resolve that, and linking it to source code as well. One of the things that I like to mention, because a lot of game studios, of course, wouldn't want a SaaS product like Backtrace have access to our source code, that you can configure it in such a way that that source code service lives in your cloud, and our support wouldn't even be able to access your source code information. So it can just, that can be like a mini on-prem thing. But there's other things as well. Top right, we have the log files. We have breadcrumbs that on the bottom of the screen. So these are just basically system events that happen, or events that happen in your game. Like, for example, if you have certain phases in your game, bases get upgraded, levels get loaded, tutorials get finished. Embedding that kind of information gives you the context to reproduce some of those problems. Speaking of reproducing, you need a lot of context information on what that customer was doing. Was the app in the foreground, background, what kind of device was it, how much memory was free, et cetera, what was their system locale. It's a lot of information to think of, and having that harvested automatically is very, very important to actually resolve that. So device data, metadata, where you are. And this can be game specific as well, like if it's something about the car that your player is driving or the class that they're playing or something like that. Cool. So Mac has a couple of pro tips. So I'm going to try to do my best to represent them. This is the stuff that he learned doing this with game development. So use vector graphics for higher resolutions like 4K. Embed SVG graphics. I don't know that much more about that, so take that for what it is. Infinite loops I understand better. When you're writing games, there's a lot of infinite loops. That's just like sort of the nature of the beast compared to other type of programming. Having hard breaks to detect situations that you don't expect it to be in, and if you're in that situation, you actually want to break out of the loop, is an important way to like put fail safes in so that you can fail gracefully. Hard cap frame rates. If you have some kind of gamer that has a sick rig that can do 250 FPS and your game starts doing weird things, it makes sense to just limit it to 60 or something like that you don't have problems there. And keeping it simple. Dividing by pi is a really bad idea. I wish I knew the anecdote behind this. It seems like a bad idea, I agree, but I don't know why. So, other tips are doing your art first, right? Programming modules, classes, and functions change much faster. Working on your art first. Not perfecting it, but having the largest elements of that is important. Don't switch game engines. So once you get programming, don't upgrade. Stick to where you are. I think that's a pretty common practice. Don't mess with the render thread at all. The moment that you start doing that, bad idea. Even with medium-sized team, it is a black box and should be treated as such. And don't rely on viral marketing because you can end up trying to market your marketing content. Plan to spend $1 dev budget to $1 marketing because you need that to initially get a fan base going, to get that feedback to grow your game out. So what does success look? We've been talking about failure a lot. Work on what you love. Like the things, it shouldn't just be a dirty job and getting it done. Create something that you never tire of. And you can fail up. So this is true as well with other areas of different industries. Even if your initial game doesn't get the success that you want, it can be in your back catalog. Think of artists, musicians that you love that didn't break through until their third album, but then their first and their second then immediately become popular as well because they want to know more about this game type. And finally, of course, never give up. You never know what the future holds. So keep learning, keep growing, and you will achieve success. Thank you. And Mac's game, and he has a robot that is programmed using UE4, is available at Mark Clark, macclark.com. I was Vincent Lussenburg. Thanks for your attention. I think it's 12 right at the dot. But we have a booth, Vectors has a booth in the break room. If there's any questions, if you want a demo, anything like that, come seek us out. And yeah, thanks for being here.